Hello everyone, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to knit your own table runner and customize its length and width. This is a sample piece that I'm showing you here, and it's a wonderful project with a great center motif. The geometric shape of the pattern works really well with a rectangular table, and the detail is wonderful. It makes a great gift for someone or for yourself, and it's overall quite a quick project to make. As you can see, these forks move inward and come out again, creating somewhat of a movement effect, and coupled with many of these repeated over a long table runner, the overall piece would look like a work of art. So it's really a great pattern with lots of detail, and it's also quite easy to produce, and in this tutorial I will show you how to make it from start to finish. For this project I used a size 10 crochet thread, and I used crochet thread because I like the delicateness that it creates. Being a table runner, I preferred not to be bulky but silky, and going back to crochet thread will give me that silky, lacy effect that I am searching for. This particular crochet thread brand that I use is called Curio Crochet Thread, C-U-R-I-O. You can find a review on my channel, and the particular color that this is called is Ice Lily. And for this project I used a size 3.5 millimeter needle. I used a larger size needle in comparison to the thread because I wanted to get bigger stitches and holes to get that more lacy look. And I used a circular knitting needle, but it's not mandatory. Overall, this project is easy to make. The pattern is fairly easy. It's only 18 rows, with half of them repeating itself. I would have to say the most difficult part would be working with crochet thread, since it's so small, and with knitting there's more things to pay attention to as opposed to crochet. But with practice, and this pattern will give you lots of practice, it's something that you can get a hang of in a matter of time, so it's nothing to worry about. I'm going to do my best to try and explain everything to you so even a beginner can follow along. All you're going to have to know before we begin are: Number 1, how to do a basic knit stitch. Number 2, how to do a purl stitch. Number 3, how to do a knit 2 together decrease. Number 4, how to do an SSK decrease. And number 5, a garter stitch, which, by the way, a garter stitch is very simple. It's row 1, knit 1 across, row 2, knit 1 across, and repeats row 1 and 2. So as long as you know how to do those, you will be fine. Through this tutorial, I will also show you how to do the decreases, so if you haven't done them before, just follow along. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be using a larger yarn and a larger sized knitting needle, so it's easier to see. I'm going to be using a size 4.5 millimeter knitting needle, and of course my preference is a circular needle. Again, you don't have to use a circular needle. And I'm just going to be using this bulkier red yarn that I have at home. Now before we get started, I'm going to give you an idea of how the pattern is laid out. So the pattern goes like this. We have our first row, like this. So we have a few stitches here, we have some purls, a few stitches here. Then the second row, we have these stitches increase. The middle section gets smaller and the end increases. Then it increases, it gets smaller, and it increases. So it's like a triangle. While these ones keep increasing, this one gets smaller. Eventually we'll get to a point where we would stop increasing and it will go up like this, while this point here will begin to trail out like that. Okay, so that's basically the idea of the pattern, and then it ends here and we repeat again here using this triangle. And that's how the pattern is in a general sense, okay, just to give you an idea. So the first thing we're going to have to do is cast on 20 stitches. I'm going to do the long tail method of casting on. So follow me and I'll show you how to do that. So with the long tail cast on method, we need a long tail. So that's just extra yarn. So keep pulling your yarn, and we need a very long tail because at this point we don't know how much tail we're going to need or how much stitches that we're going to create. We're going to determine that in a bit. But we need a really big tail, I would say give yourself at least 4 or 5 feet of tail, just to be safe, because we don't want to run out of yarn halfway through and have to start all over again. Okay, so here I've got my 4 or 5 feet of tail, and I'm going to begin casting on. So to begin the long tail cast on method, what you're going to need to do to start is do a slip knot. So slip knot, make an X, pull your tail through, and you have a knot like that. You're going to take your needle, put it through, and just tighten the tail. So this part's the tail, this part is attached to the ball of yarn, okay? So to do the long tail cast on method, we're going to take the tail and we're going to put it into our palm like this. And then we're going to close our hand. So we have something that looks like this. We're going to take our thumb, pull it out, rest it on the yarn. Then we're going to twist over like this. At this point, we're going to take our needle with the yarn, cross it over, and that creates an X. Right? We're going to take our needle, insert from the bottom up, hold on to the needle. We're going to take our yarn that's attached to the ball, wrap it around as if we're doing a knit stitch. We're going to take this loop and we're going to pull it over, and then we're going to take our tail and we're going to pull. So that creates one stitch. So our slip stitch is considered as one stitch. The stitch that we just made is considered our second stitch. Okay, so in the meantime, I want you to keep track of the number of stitches that you're creating, and we need a total of 20 right now. Okay, so let's do that again. To do the long tail cast on, take the tail, put it into our palm like this, clamp it shut. Put our hand like this, rest our thumb onto the yarn, and twist around. Take the needle, make an X, insert your needle from the bottom up, hold the needle, take your yarn attached to the ball, wrap it around like you're knitting, take the loop, pull it over, take the tail, pull the tail. Okay, let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so let's do that one more time so you can see how it's done. Just like this, wrap it around, and then so as you go faster, it looks like this. Okay, so it's very similar to knitting. Okay, just like that. So continue doing that until you have a total of 20 stitches. So that's what I'm going to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now that we have 20 stitches, don't bunch it up. So don't bunch it up like that, or don't stretch it out like that either. I want you to let them sit naturally onto the needle. Okay, just like that. So something naturally like that. And now I want you to take a ruler and I want you to measure the length of this. So from here to here. So here I have my ruler and we're just going to measure. So mine is approximately 3.5 inches, more or less 3.5 inches, right? So it's going to be difficult to get exact measurements just because the stitches move around so much. But if you let them sit, we're going to just get approximate numbers. So this is approximately 3.5 inches. Okay, so now the next step is to determine the total width that you want your piece to be. So for example, I want my piece to be a total of about 7 inches. Okay, so then once I've determined the total width that I want mine to be, I'm going to continue casting on stitches until I reach the width that I want. Okay, so I'm going to continue casting on stitches until I reach approximately 7 inches. All right, so I want you to determine the width that you want and then continue casting on until you reach that width. So I'm going to continue casting on until I reach approximately 7 inches. Okay, and we have to end in an even number, all right? So I'm going to do that. You do yours, and I will meet you once we have cast on all of our stitches. So here I have finished casting on all my stitches until I achieved an approximate measurement of 7 inches that I wanted. So the total number of stitches that I have, based on my size of the yarn and my size of the needle, is 44 stitches, ending with an even number, right? So once again, to count it, our slip stitch is counted as a stitch, so make sure you count that as a stitch. And the total that I have is 44 stitches. And as you can see, it measures approximately 7 inches, which is what I want. Now with the total number of stitches you have, we next need to determine how we want our table runner laid out. Okay, so I'm going to show you the table runner, the sample I made again. So in the meantime, you might have a lot of tail left over, and if that's the case, you can cut it off. We don't need to use any more of it. Give yourself a little bit of tail so that we can weave it in at the end, but other than that, the majority of it you can cut off if you have excess remaining. Okay, so here's our sample, and with the total number of stitches you have, we need to determine how we want our table runner laid out. Okay, so this is totally up to you how you want it done, but the table runner is divided into 2 parts. Okay, the pattern, so this is the pattern here, and the border. So the middle section is the pattern, and these purl stitches and this garter stitch is the border. Okay, so we're going to separate the two: border, pattern, border. Okay, this pattern part here, it uses 20 stitches. Okay, this uses 20 stitches. So that's why we cast on 20 stitches at the beginning, so we can get a measurement. Okay, so the remaining stitches that you have will be for the border. Okay, and we wanted an even number to end off with, because we're going to have to divide that number into 2, because we have the left side and we have the right side, so we want to make it even. So in the case of me, I have 44 stitches on mine, okay, from here to here. So that means 20 of them will be for the pattern, and the remaining 24 will be for the border. Okay, so that means that we're going to have to take this number and divide it by 2. So 12 is going to go here, and 12 is going to go there. And that's how our table runner is going to be laid out. Okay? Now, I hope you're following along, because there's just 2 more things to note, and that is the border is made up of border and border. The border is made up of the garter stitch and the purl stitch. Right, as you can see here, we have the purl stitches here, and we have the garter stitch, the purl stitches and the garter stitch, right? So we need to determine with our 12 stitches here how many stitches we want for the garter and how many stitches we want for the purl. And again, it's totally up to you. In the case of me, I did 4 stitches for the garter and 8 stitches for the purl. 8 purl, 4 garter. And that's what I'm going to do for this tutorial again. But it's up to you. You could have 10 stitches for the garter and 2 for the purl, right? You could have half and half. It's completely up to you. I prefer the look with more purls and less garters, but that's just me. It's your table runner. You can do it how you see fit. Okay? So finally, before we move on, I want to point out one more thing, and that is if you have a large number of stitches, more than 40, you qualify to create 2 patterns with a border if you want. For example, if you have 50 stitches, you could do it 20 will be for the pattern, and you can also have another 20 for a second pattern side by side. That makes 40. And then the remainder 10, you can have 5 here and 5 here for the border, okay? Or you could do, let's say you have 60 stitches. Let's say you have 60. You could have 20 for the pattern. You could have maybe some garter stitches in here or some purl stitches in between a second pattern of 20, right? So let's say we have 4 garter stitches in the middle, separating 2 patterns. So that means we will have 16 stitches remaining. Divide that by 2, we'll have 8 on each side for the border. Okay, so you can also do it like that. So it's up to you how you want to play it out. So think it through, and once you've done that, we can begin. So think through if you have over 40, if you want to do 2 patterns, or if you want to do 1 pattern and 2 borders, and think how many garter stitches you want and how many purl stitches you want in your border. Okay? So in this tutorial, I will show you the pattern that I did right here. And for this sample, I did 44 total stitches, 20 stitches for the pattern, plus 24 stitches for the border divided by 2, that's 12 on each side. And for my border, I did 4 garter stitches, 8 purl, 4 garter, okay? And that's what I'm also going to be doing for this sample again. So when you're ready, continue this video and follow me and we can begin round 1. As for the length, if you're wondering, the length, we will determine the length after we have completed 1 round of the pattern, so 18 rows. After that, we will determine how we want to customize our length. Okay? So I will meet you when you're ready to begin row 1. So for this sample here, we have our border here, and we have our border here with our garter stitches at the edge. At the top here, I did a garter stitch border, which is simply garter stitch all the way across. I did it for 6 times, 6 rows here, before I started the pattern, right? The bottom here, six times before I started the pattern. And that creates a border around here. Now for this tutorial, I'm not going to do the top border here, these 6 garter stitches, just because I want it without it this time. But I will be doing these garter stitches here, this border here, the pattern, the border, and the garter stitches here. I'll be doing that, just not the top one and just not the bottom one, okay? So, but if you choose to do it, all you have to do is when you cast on, do a garter stitch all the way across for about 6 rows or so, depending on how thick you want it to be. But for this sample piece here, I just did it just to bind it off, okay? But you don't have to do it, and I'm not going to be doing it for this tutorial. But you can do it if you choose to, it's up to you. And once you're done your 6 rows, then we can begin round 1, which is what I'm going to be showing you, okay? So let's begin.